A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards, and we are going to be talking about some infringements today. Unfortunately, Massachusetts, House Democrats passing H 4135. I think that's the last bill number they assigned to the Lawful Citizens Imprisonment Act. It went through multiple bill numbers, only one public hearing, however, for the gun control bill. But in the end, Democrats in the House voting 120, well, the final vote 120 to 38 in favor of these new infringements on the right to keep and bear arms for Massachusetts gun owners. We're going to be talking about this in just a second with Mike Harris. He's the Director of Public Policy for the Gun Owners Action League in Massachusetts. You know, there's not a lot of good news to report today, obviously, but there is still some question about what the state Senate is going to do. Remember, this was supposed to be, several months ago, this joint initiative between the state Senate and the state House, but there were some political infighting going on between the House and Senate leaders. Senate is working on its own gun control bill. We haven't seen it, by the way, so we don't know what it looks like. Is it going to largely mirror what was passed by the House? We're going to see some other provisions, more gun-free zones and things of that nature. Again, we'll talk about it with Mike Harris from the Gun Owners Action League in just one second. Before we get to that, however, there is something else we got to talk about. Joe Biden's America, it is absolutely crushing us. You've got companies laying off tens of thousands of workers, one after another. America's working two jobs just to get by. Inflation, pushing hardworking families to the brink. Just look at the price of lunch meat next time you go to the grocery store. And the digital dollar could be coming down the pipeline to completely destroy our way of life. The truth is, you need a plan. You know it, and I know it. And that's why you should call Goldco. So you can diversify your savings and investments with gold and silver before things get worse. They're a six-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, thousands of five-star reviews, and they've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. They're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last. And if you call them today, qualified callers will get a free Ronald Reagan half-ounce silver coin. So don't wait. Call Goldco at 855-412-3806 today. That's 855-412-3806. And without any further ado, let's get to our conversation with Mike Harris of the Gun Owners Action League about the Lawful Citizens Imprisonment Act. And what happens next? Take a look and a listen. Mike, thanks so much for coming on the program, sir. It's really good talking with you. And first of all, before we get started, thanks for everything you do at the Gun Owners Action League. I mean, you must have one of the most difficult jobs in the country as public policy director for gold there in Massachusetts.
I'm getting really strong calves walking up this hill.
All right. So, I barely even know where to get started here. I mean, 120 to 38. I got to ask, Mike, why all of the sleight of hand? Why all the legislative trickery? Why pulling bills back and introducing new bill numbers and all this stuff when the Democrats voted overwhelmingly for this egregious legislation, when all was said and done?
Well, apparently they found a time machine and wanted to try it out. And, so what they did was they kind of took a supplemental bond bill that had already kind of gone through most of the process, stuck this language in it, pretended it had always been there, and then excised it and gave it its own bill number without having to go through the whole legislative process on the House side. Because the bond bill is a money bill, and those all have to start in the House. Yeah. So they're the only House or chamber that could have done this. The Senate couldn't have done this. So, yeah. I mean, but to speak to your actual question, yeah, beats me. I think the speaker just wanted to get this done as fast as possible, and was a little butthurt over the fact that we had the juice to push back on 4420 when it first came out.
I suspect that's it too, right? Well, we're not going to give him time to gin up the opposition. We're just going to ram it through as quickly as possible. We'll keep the caucus on board. I wonder, have you heard anything about, was there any need for arm twisting to get some Democrats on board here, or were they truly okay with all of these new prohibitions and regulations on legal gun owners?
There were a couple of surprises on the list. I don't know how I feel about naming names of specific legislators, but there were a couple names in the list where we were like, what happened there? We're going to have to call and find out why they voted for this. There's one in particular that's really like has been bothering me a lot. Even when I saw the green light go on, I was like, what? How? But we've heard a couple instances. There was one Democratic rep that didn't vote at all because he was offended by the call he received from the speaker. He was going to vote for this anyways, and apparently got a phone call and said, you know what? No thanks. I'm not even going to vote for anything. I'm not going to vote at all. So I don't know. There were some surprises and some weird stuff that we heard had gone on in the background, but I'm more interested to see what happens with the Senate at this point. I guess I'm looking forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the Senate because, going back to the summer when 4420 was first introduced, the Senate leadership was very quick to say, hey, we're working on our own bill. We don't need to pass this stuff, right away. As long as we get something by the end of the year, we should take our time. Now, I don't know about you, Mike. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't expect the Senate bill to be great news for gun owners either. But there's some political infighting, right? So some intra-party back and forth between House and Senate leadership. So now that 4135 passes, the Senate is still working on their own bill, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, they're going to have to they're going to have to conference it out. I mean, the odds that this language that we saw pass yesterday is going to be conferenced is close to zero, in my opinion. I don't think we're going to see this exact language end up being law. But, like you just said, I mean, it's not going to be good news for us. But there's this weird thing that always happens. So, Massachusetts is kind of, it's a weird place. I mean, that. And whenever we have a Republican governor, the wheels seem to be a little greasier in the legislature, and they seem to get things done. But whenever there's a Democrat in the corner office, and you would think that it would be like really easy for them to get stuff done, there's this weird like credit claiming thing that kind of goes on, and stuff kind of slows down it, and it's odd. And we're starting to kind of see some of that happen with this bill, I think.
Okay.
This is kind of the first sign of like how this administration and this legislative leadership is going to handle each other with controversial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a long answer to say we're a weird place to live.
Well, it is a weird place to live. And, I noted in my story at Bearing Arms this morning, that Massachusetts is actually losing population.
Yeah.
People are leaving than are moving in. I don't think that, and I kind of was half serious when I said I think there are probably a lot of gun owners in the state who are looking at, Zillow or Redfin today. What is your message to those folks who say, God, it has just become too hostile? We've seen gun companies leave. Now it's time for the gun owners to pack up and turn out the lights. What's your response to folks who just say, I'm ready to move to New Hampshire. I'm ready to move to some other state. Maybe I'll move to Wyoming out west, where I don't have to worry about this stuff.
I mean, our message is, do we got to do at this point? I mean, Jim's been saying all along that this bill is going to make it impossible to comply with the state's gun laws. So if you stay here, you might be taking a risk. Might be risking your personal safety and your freedom. It's great to have enough people here to continue the fight and to stay in it, but as gun owners, we're an individualistic group, and do we need you to take care of yourself? But we'd love to have you stay in the fight, but it's tough. It's a balancing act.
Well, and listen, I was born in Massachusetts. I would love, in theory, to be able to move back. But there's just no way that I could, and I will say my advice to anybody who leaves, and I think I first heard this from Scott Bach from the Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs years and years and years ago. And he said, look, I don't blame you if you decide, you got to go somewhere else. But But if you can, still contribute to those state organizations, help fight for the gun owners who are left behind, who can't leave because they've got family, they've got work obligations, they can't just pack up and move. Stay involved in those organizations. And so that's what I would tell gun owners. I mean, if you're moving to New Hampshire, if you're interested in Virginia, stay involved with Goal because the fight is going to continue. And I like you said, man, I don't blame gun owners for leaving either if they have the opportunity. But we still have to fight these fights, right? We still have to push back against these bills. We still have to sue when these bad bills become bad laws.
Yeah.
And that takes money. That takes members. That takes a real grassroots army.
Yeah. I mean, voluntarily giving up ground is still losing ground. So, I mean, I was actually, do you know Toby Leary from Cape Gun Works? He's great. So he was there with us all day yesterday, and we were talking about this and how difficult it is to look around and see this place that, is where it's the cradle of liberty. It's where all this stuff started. I mean, 10 miles to the east of us is Lexington and Concord. It's where I'm sitting right now. It's wild. The first shot was fired in response to the regulars coming to take the battery. I mean, it's so strange how left of a turn this state has taken. But we're just looking around and we're looking at this beautiful area where we're in. The property that the State House was built on was owned by John Hancock, and we're down the hill is where Sam Adams was buried. One of the most outspoken revolutionaries at the time. And we're just like, where did the spirit go? Like, this wonderful place where we live is just completely unrecognizable to, freedom loving Americans. And it's just it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's still worth it to stay in the fight and do this. That's why I'm still here. I'm going to teach my kids about it. I'm going to teach my kids how to shoot. I'm going to teach them about civics and history, and I'm going to teach them about what they tried to do to us yesterday. And, just kind of get it into their heads of how worth it is to save this place.
Absolutely. And, you talk about the history, even before Lexington and Concord, I mean, going back to 1765 and the Stamp Act, when Bostonians said, forget this, you saw that series of, antagonistic moves on the part of the British government. At one point, I think they called them the oppressive acts, but the colonists called them the intolerable acts, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty good description for H 4135. That this is intolerable. Absolutely. When you talk about how gun owners really are going to be in legal jeopardy if they try to exercise their Second Amendment rights, if this language were to become law. I realize this is an open-ended question, and this could last for hours if I ask you to go through everything that's wrong with the bill. But give me a couple of examples about why this bill is so dangerous to the exercise of a fundamental civil right.
So, number one for me is the live fire mandates. I mean, so that's not a dangerous one, but it's one of those things where, so in Massachusetts, we have this weird thing. We have no public ranges. I think we have 4 for-profit ranges where you don't have to be a member to go shoot there.
Okay. 4. The rest of the entire state.
4 in the entire state. Yeah. And they're all in the eastern part. And the rest of them are all private clubs. So this live fire mandate for training, I don't know where you're going to do it. Who's going to pay for it? Where's it going to take place?
And I want folks to understand, because Massachusetts is a little weird about this.
Super weird.
Your license to carry is also your permit to own a gun, right?
Yes.
So we're not talking about live fire training for concealed carry, which again, I have issues with in terms of range access too. Mm-hmm. This is live fire training before you can simply keep a handgun in your home, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's FID. It's for an FID. So an FID card is anything you can purchase. It's a long gun permit, a non-large capacity long gun permit. And then the LTC, the license to carry, is everything else. It's handguns, large capacity, and on up. But yeah, I mean, this is for everything. This is to own, to possess, and just have, not just to carry. So yeah, I mean, it's that stuff. There's the sensitive places aspect of the bill. That's really weird, where you'd have to have expressed permission from a private property owner to have a firearm on their property. So say you're out hunting on public land where you're allowed to do so and you're licensed. If you have to cross through private property to get to another section, you're committing a felony while you're taking those 8 steps through, Joe Schmo's property that's adjacent to the land where you're hunting. It's that stuff. The storage laws are really complicated now. Transportation laws. It's just this weird morass of like pitfalls.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really good way to put it. I mean, every time you try to exercise your right, you're navigating this minefield of potential felonies, right?
Yeah.
And unless if you veer off to the left or right just an inch or two, all of a sudden, boom, you've broken the law. Yeah. You could be looking at prison. And the chilling effect that it has on the exercise of our Second Amendment rights, I think, is exactly what you're talking about. Whether it's the live fire mandates is going to prevent people from becoming gun owners in the first place, or at least legal gun owners, right? Yeah. To, again, all of these regulations and restrictions that are enforced once you decide and once you're able to exercise your Second Amendment rights. It really is an untenable situation. And by the way, all of these are aimed at law-abiding gun owners, right? At legal gun owners, at the folks who want to follow the law. They don't want to commit a felony. They don't want to commit a misdemeanor. I heard talk about, they keep referencing this shooting in Holyoke where this pregnant woman was shot. Her unborn child was killed. And this is why we need this law. Well, at least one of these jackasses already has, I think, 2 open firearm cases. I don't know about the second suspect, but I'll eat this hat if he was a licensed gun owner.
Right. And that's the fight. I mean, that's always the fight. They're blaming the wrong group of people for the situation that they're in. Yeah.
Now, not that it mattered yesterday, but it might matter as this bill and this discussion moves over to the Senate. Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association had come out unanimously in opposition to this bill. First time in history, they said that they've been unanimously opposed, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So yesterday, the House Democrats say, okay, well, you know what? We'll throw you a bone. You're now exempt from all of these, off-duty carry restrictions. You can carry. We'll exempt law enforcement from that. What happened there? Because as you and I were talking off air right before we started this interview, sounds like there were some claims that the Chiefs had been by Democrats that, okay, the Chiefs are now on board. Is that the case?
Yeah, where there were some rumors going around to different reps who were like, oh, I was going to vote against this because of the Chiefs, but now I heard that they're on board with it. So now I'm going to vote for it. And we're like, whoa, slow down. We didn't hear this. Let's clarify. So one of the Republican reps reached out to the executive director over at MCOPA, Massachusetts Police, and said, hey, we heard this rumor going around. Is your opposition wavering? And he said, no. And emailed him a statement back clarifying everything, saying, nope, we are still firmly opposed to this bill. Any rumors you've heard to the contrary are completely false. Somebody's lying to you. So that's there was just so many just slimy things yesterday that the whole process just felt gross.
Yeah.
And and from the floor, it was every 5 minutes one of them was claiming that there was racist dog whistles in our advocacy and we wanted kids to die and all this stuff. It's like, oh my God, just stop it with the demonization. We're done with this. Can we just have a conversation like adults? It's wild.
Yeah.
And when they're speaking from the floor, it's impossible for us to, come out in a timely fashion against that stuff. So it's on the record. It's wild.
Right. But I realize that Massachusetts Democrats don't like being compared to Governor Wallace in Alabama. I get it. But you know what? We are talking about a fundamental civil right.
Yeah.
We are talking about attempts to criminalize that civil right, to punish people who would dare to exercise that right. And frankly, I will say, and this just comes from, 20 years of reporting on gun control issues. these unconstitutional gun laws impact every one of us.
Absolutely.
But the harm will disproportionately fall on minorities in high crime neighborhoods who
Absolutely.
may not be carrying legally, but have no violent intent. They're carrying because they live in a high crime neighborhood and they want to be able to protect themselves. And the gun laws in Massachusetts make it impossible for them to do so lawfully.
Yeah.
All of these nonviolent possessory offenses, and we've seen this in state after state, those arrests, those convictions, those incarcerations do fall disproportionately among minorities. So I don't think it is racist to point that out. I don't think it is racist to point out that we are talking about a civil rights fight here. I understand why the Democrats want to turn around and try to smear gun owners, but it doesn't change the fact that what they are doing is going to put more people in prison.
Absolutely.
For something that is, frankly, in most states across the country, simply seen as exercising your constitutional right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you remember, if you had seen it, there's a rapper named Killer Mike, and he did an interview on Bill Maher's show, and he's no right winger,
right?
But he said, but he's a big 2A advocate, and he said, this stuff, these kinds of laws affect our community worst and first. He said, so that, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's absolutely going to affect the those community, or put upon communities a lot faster and harder than it does us.
And I also get that for Democrats, they've been able to thread this needle, right? They don't want to talk about the contradiction between less policing and more gun control. There was a town hall meeting, I think, in Dorchester. I wrote about this last week, and I was really struck by that, where you had people saying, I don't want more policing. We don't need more law enforcement here. We need more gun control. And I thought to myself, well, how do you think this works? I mean, if you don't want more arrests, if you don't want over policing, quote unquote, but you want more gun control, guess what you're going to get? And I don't know how we reach those Democrats and those liberals who seem to think that you can have less law enforcement and more gun control laws. Yeah. I mean, you can have both of those things in theory, right? You have more laws on the books that don't get enforced, but what's the point of that? Again, it is frustrating to look at this, and I live in a state that's, at the moment anyway, fairly decent when it comes to recognizing our Second Amendment rights. The frustration that you must feel on a daily basis in trying to, educate, and I don't use this word as an insult, but just educating the ignorant, educating non-gun owners who don't have to know about these things. They don't have to know the intricacies of Massachusetts gun laws. They're not gun owners. Of course not. Why would they? But they still, as good citizens, need to understand the intended and unintended consequences of these policies that they're supporting.
And even if you're not currently exercising your Second Amendment rights or whatever other rights you have, I mean, if somebody takes them away, it's not just taking them away from the people who are doing it at the time. That means in the future, if you want to go do it, you can't.
Yeah.
It's from you too. I mean, it's and actually, speaking on what you just said, I mean, if you want less policing and more gun control, who do you think is doing the controlling part of that?
Right.
It's who are you hiring to do that? So I don't know.
The two
politicians out there.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just absolutely bizarre. All right, so what's the next step? What should gun owners in Massachusetts be doing? In addition to pulling out their hair in frustration, what should we be contacting state senators now? Should we keep our powder dry? Is it time to start reaching out to the Senate?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've been advocating that from the beginning, just telling them to kind of put a bug in their ears and say, like, hey, this is happening on the House side. Like, you might not be paying attention as deeply as you should be, but they're coming for this. This is one of the speaker's top priorities. He's slamming this thing home, whether it takes some procedural dirty trick or not. It's happening. So it's coming to you guys. Start paying attention to this. So yeah, I mean, contact your senator. Let them know how you feel. It's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked the first time through. It put a delay on it, and even though 4607 and 4135 are bad bills, there were some changes made in there that were done because of pressure from us. I mean, there's a grandfather clause in there now for assault style firearms. Man, I love how they just keep changing the terminology on us. It's great. Just three card Monty,
Right.
but yeah, it's wild. But yeah, I mean that's the next step. That's where we are. I mean, it's about a quarter of the way through the process at this point. It's not law yet, but if we don't keep the pressure up, it will be before you know it.
Yeah. And we'll talk about lawsuits when that time comes, and if that time comes. But
yep.
Yeah, you're right. Gun owners need to stay in the fight. Even if you're looking and talking to a realtor today, as long as you're living in Massachusetts, you are in this fight, and you need to be engaged and involved.
Be like John Petrolino. He's
that's
out
right.
He's out in Jersey, but he still supports us.
That's right. Absolutely. Hey, listen, man, I really appreciate, everything that you do. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It was a great chance to catch up. I wish the conversation, the topic was better, but, can't talk about the Red Sox this year either. So
I know. I know. Or the Patriots.
Right. I know. Well, listen, Mike, thank you again. And I look forward to doing this again very soon, man.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me, Cam. Appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Mike Harris with the Gun Owners Action League join us here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Thanks to Mike for joining us on the program. We, of course, going to be staying on top of what's going on with both H4135 in the House and the unnumbered to date Senate gun control bill there in Massachusetts. Right now, let's turn our attention to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of Chicago, courtesy of the website CWB Chicago, which reports a man on bail for attempted murder and carjacking, now accused of burglarizing 2 cars in Logan Square. Why was he out to begin with? Is the question. I mean, those are pretty serious charges he's facing. 25-year-old Orlando Masonette, initially ordered detained for violating the conditions of his release in the attempted murder case, but a judge last week, according to CWB Chicago, decided to release him again. So she put him on an ankle monitor this time around. The attempted murder charge comes from an incident that took place in September of 2020. Illinois State Police said Masonette struck another man's car. 2 got into an altercation. Shots fired during the fight. Masonette drove away with the victim's vehicle. Yeah, when the victim, thankfully, did not suffer life-threatening injuries, Masonette was also wounded in this encounter. He received a gunshot wound to the head. Investigators located Masonette at a hospital, arrested him. He remained hospitalized even after prosecutors charged him. Grand jury leveling 13 counts against him, including multiple counts of attempted murder, vehicular hijacking, gun violations. Masonette's defense attorney said, look, my client's suffering seizures almost every day after being shot. You got this pandemic going on. Who knows when he's going to get his day in court. You got to reduce his bail so he can get out. Lawyer argued he had no violent crime convictions, was not getting adequate medical care in jail, and if he caught COVID behind bars, his weakened health would increase the chances of a, quote, negative outcome. According to CWB Chicago, somebody identified as a friend posted $75,000 for Masonette to get out of jail on April 7th, 2021. And he managed to keep himself out of trouble, I guess, for a little while. But late last month, September 26th, Chicago police responding to a call of criminal damage. Witness reported that a group of masked men ran from the scene, pointed towards the guy who was later identified as Masonette. Cops stopped him for a conversation. Another man walked up while they were chatting with Masonette, told the officers that he saw Masonette breaking into a car outside of his home, as well as another car a few houses down. Masonette was arrested, then charged with 2 counts of felony burglary for intending to get into the vehicle steering columns. But again, Judge Barbara Dawkins decided that Masonette could be released on the burglary allegations, even though, again, he has not yet faced trial for the crimes that he's accused of back in 2020. She held him in custody, though, for violating pretrial release. But that decision was overturned by Judge Tiana Blakely, who decided instead last week to release him on electronic monitoring. CWB Chicago reports that Masonette's due back in court on November 3rd for the burglary case, December 18th for the attempted murder allegations. Hopefully he shows up. I would say, at least they know where he is, but no, they really don't, because he could cut that ankle monitor off and they wouldn't be able to find him again until maybe arrested for yet another crime. Today's Armed Citizen story from Houston, Texas, where a suspected car thief was shot by his intended victim at an apartment complex overnight. Now, we don't have a lot of details here, but what we do know from the Harris County Sheriff's Office is that a man at an apartment complex saw somebody trying to break into his car. It's about 10:30 Wednesday evening. He drew his firearm, ran outside, trying to get the guy to stop, but the car thief had a gun of his own, and we don't know who shot first, but there was apparently an exchange of gunfire. The burglar ended up being hit, was able to walk himself to a nearby liquor store, where apparently he contacted authorities. An emergency took him, or an ambulance rather, took him to the hospital. Last reported as stable, not apparently suffering any life-threatening injuries. The owner of the car wasn't hurt, questioned by police, but not detained or taken into custody. It appears that they are investigating this as a case of self-defense. We'll try to bring you more details as they become available. And finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A family in Oak Park, Michigan, in Oakland County, in Detroit, or in the Detroit area, saving their neighbors from a massive home fire. And even though one of the neighbors was injured in this life-saving effort, they say it was well worth it. Fire broke out Wednesday morning about 1 a.m. Investigators still trying to figure out what caused the blaze. But Albert Wilson, one of the neighbors in question, helped to save the residents inside. He said, "I'm real hurt because I feel they're my family. They're losing everything. And they don't bother nobody." Leslie Wilson, Albert's wife, says, "To see the home like this is going to be a different scene for me." Their sons actually ran across the street to get everyone out of the home. Albert said, "My son was over there beating on the windows. One's beating out the window on the side, saying he can see the old man in there." Once fire department arrived, everybody able to make it out safe and sound. Albert says, "My son ended up cutting his hand trying to grab at the man inside once he broke the window. But all three residents came out," he said, "so we ended up getting him across the street, sat him down, gave him blankets, water, all that kind of stuff." Leslie Wilson says she's proud her boys knew what to do. She said if it wasn't for them being up and waking us up, we'd be telling a different story right now. She said we was going in there if somebody else was in there for sure. Their son, who again cut himself while reaching through that broken glass to haul out one of the residents inside, was treated for minor injuries, but he is expected to be okay. Again, the family is okay, although it looks like the home is a total loss. So, you know, their physical safety is secure, but hopefully the community will rally around this family and help them piece their life together again. Now, that is about all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I do want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. And I would encourage you to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day. We're updating the website with all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation and around the world because, yeah, we do have some international news to cover these days. If you like what you see, I'd encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member as well. All you have to do, go to BearingArms.com/subscribe, use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on your VIP or VIP membership. As our way of saying thanks for showing your support, we're going to give you exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. News stories and analysis that matter. Just like your support, so thank you again. We'll see you back here with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company on Monday. But yeah, we'll be checking and updating the website until then. So be sure to check out BearingArms.com. Have a great weekend, everybody. Look forward to talking to you soon. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.